Hi there, it's Liane, and today we are going to make a blanket stitched felt heart ornament. So I'll take you through what you need for the equipment. Ideally 3 pieces of felt in different colours, but you could use 2 and just alternate the same one for the background and the centre. 3 different colours of embroidery thread, and this is 6 strand embroidery thread. A needle that's big enough to fit the embroidery thread through, a pair of scissors, the shaped templates, and some pins. Okay, we'll get started. So choosing a shape from the templates, I've taken the hearts. We'll just cut that out with some paper scissors. And my tip for cutting things out neatly is to use quite a small pair of scissors and just aim to cut along the centre of the line. We're now going to use this as our pattern piece. So because I'm going to have a white background, I need to cut out 2 white hearts. So the best way to do this is to just fold over a piece of felt, just making sure it's wide enough to fit the shape. And then take a few pins and pin fairly close to the edge, so that the paper stays nice and flat when you're going to cut around. But just make sure the pins aren't going over the edge of the line. So the heart is pinned down nice and flat now. So I just carefully cut around that through both layers. Unpin the paper template. Front and the back piece for the hearts. So the next thing I'm going to do is make this slightly smaller middle heart. So you could either do that by cutting out another full-size heart and trimming it down, if you want to keep the paper template intact. But if you don't mind cutting this, you can either freehand, we're going to cut off about 1/2 centimetre. I'll sketch it out just to make sure I get a good shape. So that's roughly sketched, but you can see I'm aiming to keep an even distance all around the heart. Cut that away. And then that's the size for the slightly smaller piece. So I'll pin this to the middle And because we're just going to decorate the front, I only need to cut through a single layer of the felt. Don't need to fold it over to double it up. Okay, so that's pinned down, and I'll cut this out as well now. So to make the centre heart, the smallest one, I'm going to do the same thing again. Just fold it in half to keep the shape symmetrical. Sketch about half a centimetre away from the original outline, and then just cut in half again. So cut around the edge again. So again, I'm going to pin that to a single layer. Because this is quite a small shape and it's a little bit more fiddly to cut out, I've just cut out a smaller square from the bigger piece, which gives you more control when cutting out the shape. Okay, so that's the centre shape ready. So now just going to position these. This one's a little bit ragged, so I'm just going to trim it to just neaten it out by eye. Okay. And just going to lay the hearts down on the felt. Again, just checking I've got a nice even border, and lay all three down together at once. And then I'm just going to pin through the centre heart. Okay, and now we're ready to start doing the embroidery stitch. So the first colour that I'm going to work with is black embroidery thread to match in with the border. So this is 6 strand embroidery cotton. And a good amount to work with is to measure from your end of your hand to your shoulder. So just a generous arm's length. Any longer than that and the thread can end up getting quite tangled. Any shorter and you end up changing the thread quite often, having to start with a new batch of thread. So for this thickness, I felt that the 6 strands was going to be a little bit too chunky, so I've taken 2 strands from the 6 strand thread. So I'll show you how to do that. You just get hold of the 2 strands, and I like to just split the yarn with my thumb as I go. I can sometimes get a little bit tangled at the end. Okay, and then that's the 2 strands ready to use, and you can come back and use the other 4 as needed. So I've got a sharp needle with a larger eye, so a cruel needle or a sharp needle you could fold the thread over the barrel of the needle and thread it through. And then to start off, I'm going to do a couple of knots, one on top of the other at the end of the yarn. So, so this type of stitching is a blanket stitch, and it's really good for decorative edges, and also when we come to the final layer of blanket stitch, it's going to fasten both sides together. So the important thing about blanket stitch is that it's an even distance from the edge each time, and that it's also evenly spaced. So I think of it as being like 4 corners of a box, and you're always stitching within those 4 corners. So instead of starts, I would say choose somewhere that's fairly easy to start, so not a difficult curve or a point, which is slightly more challenging areas to work around. So I'm going to start this right hand stretch here where it's fairly easy to start, and going at one of the top corners of the box, and I'm hiding the knot behind that top layer. You can either push the end of the thread underneath to make sure it doesn't show, or you can trim it if needs be. And we're always keeping the thread at a right angle to the cut edge. So I'm going to go in at the top right corner of the box, and then I'm coming down, and it's behind the red layer and very slightly taking the needle through the black layer to fasten the red to the black. I'm going to pull. The key thing about blanket stitch is to make sure that this top thread sits on top of the U shape of thread. If it doesn't, it won't catch and you won't get that shape. So this is sitting on top, and I'm just going to pull gently. I'm going to leave this first one slightly loose because I'm going to catch this corner. That will tend to pull to the right, but I'm going to catch it when I come back around and finish the stitching. So I'm leaving enough of a loose thread to do that. And then I'm going to go in at the same place, so the same distance in and same spacing it evenly. Again, through the red layer and just slightly through the black. Making sure the thread's sitting on top of the loop, and the thread will catch the loop. So I'll just work my way around like this. I'll have some pointers when we get to the curve. When I get to the curve, I'm going to take out the pin because it's slightly in the way of stitching, and you can see on this curve here I've maybe had to add in a couple of extra stitches. So when you're sewing around the curve, obviously it's not straight, so you're not going to be able to go completely parallel with your stitches. So what I think of it is, if it's like the working around a clock and it'll be the numbers on the clock, you just want to be pointing into an imaginary central point, and then you'll keep it at a nice angle. To go around the point in the V of the heart, what I think would look neatest is to just do 2 stitches almost at right angles to each other. So this isn't going to be a blanket stitch, I'm just going to do a single stitch just for symmetry going all the way through. So you get that neat line, and then that gives you a straight line to go parallel to set off with your next sort of blanket stitch. So when I come through this one, I'm actually going to come out here in the centre, and that means that the blanket stitch will catch automatically. And then go back to parallel lines. when I get to the tip, I'm not going to try and stitch the point, so I'm just going to put the yarn underneath and not worry about stitching that bit, and I'm going to do the same idea of keeping the symmetry. So I've got one line pointing in, and then I'm going to just start on the other side with another stitch pointing towards this one. So it's gone underneath, and I'm just going to go in and form another blanket stitch. And then I've got one more to do to fill this gap, and then catch this final stitch here. So just to pull that, because this is still quite loose, I'm just going to go in and all the way through to the back and just pin that in place with the stitch. So this bit's going to be hidden inside, so I'm going to do it on just a couple of stitches, one on top of the other, and that will secure the thread, which can then be trimmed down. And that's the first layer done. So the second layer, I'm going to use white thread. So same again, 2 strands of the white thread, about an arm's length. Okay, so that's threaded up. Same again, just going to do a couple of knots. And what I'm going to do with the white stitching is, it's slightly different here at the bottom. I'm going to start in the same place again, and just as much as I can, I'm just going to follow the lines of the stitching that I've already done. Because it's a slightly bigger shape, when we get up to the curve of the heart, there are times when we need to add in extra stitches, just so there's not a big gap. To just go by eye and just see what looks best. How many more stitches should be added in. So again, I'm going underneath the black layer. Hide in the end, and then carrying on with a blanket stitch. Leaving the first stitch loose enough to be able to be caught and keep the correct shape. Here I'm going to do the extra stitch. I'm not going to follow the original one, I'm just doing one just between. Just done the same again for this bit, just done a blanket stitch and a straight stitch, and then carry on with the blanket stitch. final stitch, and then just want to attach that original first stitch that is loose, anchor that in place, and then another couple of stitches at the back just to finish off the thread. So now I'm going to place the hearts together, so put the back onto the front, and this one I've blanket stitched all the way around, and you can see that it's on both sides, so it's holding the heart together. Okay, so to get these to stay together, we just need a couple of pins to hold them like this. So I'm pinning, not right on the edge because we're going to be stitching on this white area. So once you've laid the hearts together, if you feel like they need a little bit of a trim just to neaten them up, like here, mine don't quite match up, so I'm just going to trim them down. Feel free to do that. Just neaten it up. Depends on how you've drawn your heart as well. You can see where I've got a narrower border. The stitches look neater, but here it's a little bit wider, so feel free to trim quite a lot away if you want to, if you want a smaller heart top. I think I'll just take a little bit away, following the original curve. This isn't essential, you'll just have slightly bigger stitches if you keep the original shape. Okay, so I'm happy with that shape now, so I'm going to start stitching the blanket stitch. And this time, because we're going to see everything on the back, we need to hide the knot inside. I think this section, straight edge, is a good place to start again. So we're going to just stitch between the two layers and let the knot just sit in there and tuck the tail away so that doesn't show. And then this time it's actually slightly easier blanket stitching through two layers because I'm going to go all the way through. The needle's coming out the other side, and then just pull again. Once you've got that loop visible, make sure that your thread is on top of the loop and just pull. This is the first stitch, so I'll just loosen it off a little bit, and then through all the way to the other side. Pull. Make sure the thread's on top of the loop. I'll do a couple more stitches, then I'll show you how the edge looks. The tension's quite important actually on this. So how tight you pull the thread. If you pull it too tight, you can get ridges on the edge of the felt. If it's too loose, you'll have little loops of thread showing at the edge. So just do this stitch and then show you. So you can see I've got like quite a flat line against the edge of the felt. So it's not going to get caught on anything. It's not so tight that it's changing the shape of the heart. So that's what you're aiming for. Just when you're thinking about the tension. Okay, so again, just working my way around, following the original stitches, because the shape's getting bigger, you may find I need to add in a few more stitches. Just another point, another tip is like where you come out is quite important, because you want the stitches to be even on the back as well. So when you put the needle through, try not to go through an angle, because you could change the shape of the stitch. So go just directly down into the fabric. Okay, come to this bit again. So just going to do straight stitch, but making sure it catches and carry on. Okay, so my thread's getting quite short now. I think once your thread gets to about 10 centimetres or less, it's time to change threads. And because we're working with the same length of thread, it's a bigger shape to get around. So I'm gonna finish this off by just knotting under here, just making a tiny knot. And then I'm gonna put the needle between the layers, and I'm actually just gonna like stitch through the back, making sure the tension's okay there, that it's staying flat. And the reason I'm doing this is if you just pull the thread very tight and snip, the end will just vanish into the centre and you won't be able to see any knot, and that gives us a neat space for starting to stitch again. So I'm going to get another 2 strands from this strand of 4 here. I think probably the way I'm going to start this is just, again, put the needle between the 2 layers, and I'm just going to come out and double over on this stitch, because that way the knot and the end of the thread can be hidden. So I'm just going to catch the thread through this knot. And then resume the blanket stitch. Got a little knot in the thread here, so just a tip for how to untangle that. Sometimes use the needle, or sometimes something thinner, so a pin. Don't pull the knot, don't pull the threads, because that will tighten the knot, so just leave it as loose as you can, and then just find part of the knot to just stick the pin into, and that should untangle it. Okay, once the stuffing is in place, if you do want to put stuffing in, you just carry on and close up the gap. If you want to keep it flat, just stitch, catching this side, and again, just gonna go under this stitch, make a loop, pass the needle through the loop to make a knot, pull that tight, and then just slip the needle between the layers again. Come out in the centre. Pull the thread tight, trim close to the fabric, and then that will just spring and disappear into the fabric. So to make a hanging loop for the heart, you could either use a piece of scrap ribbon, or you can use the embroidery thread. Just stitch through, bring the ends together. Tie a knot to make the loop and through. And then once the heart's finished. So this is the finished hearts. We've got one padded and one just flat shapes, and so they're a really good project for using up things that you've got around the home. You can make them with felted jumpers and little scraps of ribbon. Could fill them with lavender to make little hangers for the wardrobe, and yeah, I think it's a nice present for people. So I really hope you've enjoyed the project, and I will see you next week. Bye.